Hi, this is Dr. Kimberley Linert, and you're listening to Incredible Life Creator Podcast. My guest today is Wendy Darling. Wendy Darling is the co-founder of GTD, Go the Distance, Consulting, and the Miraculous Living Institute, committed to you achieving your results. With over 38 years of experience as a management and organizational development consultant, corporate influencer, relationship and transformational results expert, speaker, seminar facilitator, master healer, and coach, her entire career has been dedicated to the decoding of what needs to happen to create results. She works with those who are going for it, but something is holding them back, causing unnecessary interference. Wendy blends her psychology management and organization development experience with her unique healing gifts and processes into what is now the Miraculous Living MethodTM, a comprehensive system that creates permanent change. The steps are simple, the results are profound. Her clients finally achieve their desired results, having great influence and impact in their lives. Welcome to the podcast, Wendy.
Well, thank you, Kimberly. I'm delighted to be here.
Yes, when I was reading all those things, I'm thinking you did 3 lifetimes.
I know I was getting a little tired even listening to it.
It's a lot.
It's actually my 40th year now since I started my business, and I've been in career even longer than that. I wish I could say I started when I was 2, but it's not true.
Wow. Well, why don't you tell us your story then? Tell us where you started out. I think you said you started out like as a teacher, and now you're doing something totally different. So tell us about you.
Yeah, there have been several pivots in my career. I started as a 6th grade teacher. I had 45 students, got into trouble a lot with my principal because can you imagine 45 kids in one room? You know, it was pretty wild. It was also illegal, but that's another story. And quite honestly, I didn't have my contract renewed. I guess I was too much of a rebel back then because I liked activity in my classroom. I liked the activity of conversation and learning. And I didn't believe in everybody needed to sit and be quiet. So I guess my principal didn't like that very much. And I went back, got a couple of graduate degrees, had an extraordinary opportunity where I was Dean of Students for a program called Semester at Sea. We had 700 plus college students living on a ship. I was their mom, and we sailed around the world. And that was quite the experience, and we could spend days talking about that. When I came back, it was just a 4-month appointment. Dean of Students was a long-term goal of mine, and I thought, what's next? And training and development was in infancy back then. And I had an opportunity of going to work with either IBM or the state of Missouri. And I actually chose the state of Missouri because we oversaw all 15 departments, and it was going to provide me with a wealth of experience. We were the management and organizational development arm for the state. And so I learned how to do training and development. I ultimately headed up the consulting arm, and it paved the way for me starting my own business in 1981. So my lane corporate-wise has always been in management and leadership development, team development, those kinds of things, really looking at, I've always believed that in every organization, the perfect answer, the perfect solution is within the genius that already exists. And my job was to ask the questions and pull it out and work with it in a way that we found really wonderful solutions. And so I did that for many years. And then in 1990, I was working really hard. I was not taking good care of myself. I was working under contract with the Fortune 100 company, and I was traveling a lot. And I happened to be really sick. Quite honestly, I had been doing a juice fast while I was traveling, and I got really sick. And now I had to fly from Texas, where we were living at the time, to LA. And because I was so sick, I went outside the Dallas airport to get some fresh air. Remember, this is 1990, before we had any of these regulations we have today. And I passed out and I fell over a ledge and I fell about 25 feet.
Wow.
And yeah, it was a wow. And my right leg was shattered. I had several back fractures. I had multiple surgeries on my right leg. Didn't know for 11 months if I would ever walk again, which obviously I do. And the real blow, I also was much later diagnosed with a traumatic brain injury, which may be related to what I'm going to share in just a little bit. But the real blow came around week 4, where my former husband came, suitcases packed, saying he no longer wished to be married. And even though I take full responsibility for my portion that contributed to that decision, the timing, first of all, was not optimal. And when we went to court, he happened to be an attorney, and he was awarded full custody of our son, who was only 4.5 at that time. And that's really when I fell apart. And of all people, my mom said, well, maybe you might want to learn how to meditate, because I was just so traumatized between my accident and then losing custody of my son. And so desperate times, right? So I went to somebody that was teaching people how to meditate. We met in somebody's home, and quieting my mind at that point was a complete oxymoron. But I thought, well, what the heck? And so I remember going to Michael, who was teaching me how to meditate, the person teaching. And I said, it's really interesting. Every time I almost feel like my mind's going to relax, I get this urge to sing. And he said, well, sing. And I started laughing. I said, you don't understand. I actually have people in my life that request I not do that. And he just looked at me and goes, Wendy, just give it a try. So I went to my little place in the corner of the house, wherever I was. And I got into that space and I let this singing come out of me. And it's melodic. And for the first time, Kimberly, in a very long time, my mind started to relax. My body started to relax. And so at this point, I'm now living in Dallas, and I'm sharing a home with good friends. And what they say is true, things are a little bit bigger there. And I have this huge walk-in closet, and I would go in and do my meditation and my singing in the closet. And I was really in the closet about all of this. Remember, I was a traditional consultant doing all of this was very new to me. And it wasn't long before I recognized, this is way more than what I realized it is. And what also started happening was I started to be able to see energy. I'm walking by somebody. Again, we were in our little meditation group. I walked by this person and I say, it just comes out of my mouth, oh, you have a block around your heart. And I'm thinking to myself, well, where the heck did that come from? Mm-hmm. And what was even more interesting, this man's son was an incredibly intuitive young man. And I hear him behind me, and I hear him say to the same person, you got a block around your heart. Now I'm going, what's happened to me? So because I've always been a curious person, I started to play with it. I worked on myself. I worked with whomever I could get my little hands on. Eventually, I got brave enough to work with other people and recognize that I had really been given a gift. And it has now developed into what you refer to as the Miraculous Living Method, where I'm able to find anything that's interfering, creating a misalignment from you actually getting the results you want. And so I feel like I assist people to grow their business, make more money. One of my favorites is I work with singles to attract love. That came out of working with a lot of business owners who were not happy, and they were starting to see their business getting wobbly because they were lacking that nourishment, that partnership. So I've been really blessed in helping people, like I said, raise their financial set point, dial up attraction factors, magnetizers. All sorts of things have been developed over the years. And bottom line, people get to live the life of their dreams while still making their special mark and contribution. And I think that is a beautiful blend for me personally, because I want people to be living a life of their dreams. But I also want people to fulfill what I now refer to as their divine destiny. You know, the reason that we are all here. You know, each and every one of us has gifts that is unlike anybody else. And that's kind of our job in life, to discover what that is. And cultivate those gifts and talents in a way that we make kind of like our thumbprint, our special mark.
Beautiful. Wow, that is quite a story. So I'm just curious. So when you were working with people like with Missouri and you were doing all the organization and finding out, what people need to do as far as to be leaders and to actually make decisions, what are some of the best questions you can ask as a leader?
Oh, well, I think one important thing is what's really the vision of your workforce or the organization? What is it? But also get to a deeper heartbeat, meaning what's the mission? And by mission, so vision to me is the picture optimally of what you want to be experiencing in life, right? For example, I've always wanted to live by the water, or at least have a view of the water. But why was that important to me? Because there's something about that nourishes me, but it also is my milestone of saying you're really getting your job done. You're reaching the people that you want to reach. Now, remember, I was living in Dallas. I live in Carlsbad, California now. So I don't have that view yet. That's my next stop. However, I'm a whole lot closer to the ocean now than I was living in Dallas. I mean, it takes me 5 minutes to get to the ocean. So the vision's that ultimate picture, but it's important to get to the heart of why are we doing this? And I think it's an important conversation to have with each of your employees, and even come together as a team to say, and to create a group vision, a group mission. And I also believe as a leader, it's like, how can I serve you most? I have been in executive positions earlier in my career, and I was responsible for a lot of people. And I always wanted to go into their world. I wanted to know what they were interested in, what mattered to them, how they wanted to get feedback or reinforcement, those kinds of things. And what did they hope someday they would be experiencing next? Because I always wanted to hire the best of the best and be at risk of also losing them. I wanted to empower people to be their best. And I think as a leader, to be able to look at how can I best support my team to get the results that we want, and to be willing to have open forum. I think it's really important to get feedback. Sometimes that's best to do individually, because people sometimes, especially early on, are a little more hesitant to speak up. But then it really becomes okay and standard operating practice of, hey, let's celebrate what's working. Let's roll up our sleeves. What do we got to do different? Where are we irritated? What's not working? And so I think to be able to create safety and come from, I believe, love for the business, for each other, and to treat people with kindness and care, I found that it goes a long way.
Yeah, well, that's the kind of company I would like to work in.
Yeah, and it's possible. The interesting thing, I've obviously been doing this a very long time. Thank goodness more companies are open to this. a really good friend of mine, Steve Farber. I don't know if you ever have heard of him or know him, wrote a book called Love is Just Damn Good Business.
Mm-hmm.
And he's really quite brilliant in his approach as well. He has a formula for LEAP, love, energy, audacity, and proof, as a model for businesses to work within. And Steve, in fact, Steve's a very good friend of mine. And we had lunch one day and he said, oh yeah, I'm writing this new book. And he told me the title and I went, oh, I'm so happy for you. So sad that I didn't come up with that. But I think, especially what I even know about how energy works, when we come from a place of love, that's a high vibration. And it really helps to uplift, and including Dr. David Hawkins, who wrote the book Power versus Force. He studied this for 30 years and measured emotions. And what I love about what he did was he created a scale that, I think shame was the lowest level emotion that you could have. And the vibration and frequency of that's very low. And you can imagine anger, frustration, blah, blah, blah. Well, one of the highest emotions is love. Mm-hmm. And I think there's one above it, but I don't worry about that. And so what I really loved about his body of work is that he found that if you are coming from love, it can melt away the lower level frequencies, the lower level emotions. I teach kids this, for example, about what they call bullies. I tell them these are just kids whose hearts have been stomped on and they have empty love tanks. All you have to do is fill it up. And I teach them how to do it. You can do it silently. I had I had a client who actually was working with me because she wanted to attract love. And she was in Canada, but she was a high-level executive, an engineer overseeing 250 plus other engineers. And so she had been there a long time, and she said, maybe it's time for me to think about making a change. And I kind of went, uh-oh, because sometimes that happens, because I work with people's Rubik cubes of sorts, we kind of make little adjustments. And so long story short, out of the blue, she does get a call from a recruiter. She had just started to dust off her resume. I had suggested, hey, reach out to a couple of recruiters. This one came out of nowhere, which of course in my world, I think is wonderful, the magic and miracle of life. And so there was a position back in her hometown where she grew up in Australia, because she was thinking maybe it's time to move back to Australia. So she ended up getting the job, no surprise, going, but it was a very turbulent transition. Her boss was kind of the boss from not heaven. And the first couple of months she was there, I was really helping her navigate the transition. And I taught her how to send love to her boss, because somebody's not mean and critical just for the heck of it. And it was a very toxic work environment. And I'm meanwhile praying that this man shows up, because I'm like, oh my gosh, I was the one that said, yes, go for this job. It feels so perfect for you. And so the point of that, though, and I also told her, I said, and if something happens that your boss gets a new job or whatever, that would be okay, right? And it turns out her boss got fired. And whenever she reached out to me, I was like, oh my gosh. And by the way, in her case, because of what we were working with her team, with her other executives that she was working with, she was really starting to form really healthier relationships with everybody. And the one that couldn't stay in that environment was removed. And by the way, she did attract love. And I love too that for the first time in her life at the age of 55, she attracted her guy and got married last summer. I'm so happy for her.
That is so awesome. That is really awesome. So let's talk about, I talked about, leadership in the workplace, but what about leading ourselves? So how do we put ourselves in that place where we're kind of, we're a 10. Who doesn't want to be a 10 all the time and feel good? So how do we put ourselves in that place so that we're attractive to others, but also feel good about ourselves?
Yeah, in my experience, practicing self-love is quite a journey. Was for me, still is. It takes a conscientious effort. And so there are ways, I always believe that you have to put your oxygen mask on first for anything, whatever you're talking about, whatever category. And so what does self-love and self-care mean to you? I can speak for me. I have a morning practice where I meditate every morning. I do my process. I have intentions for my day, for my month, for my year. And I'm intentional about what steps I'm willing to take. I'll be honest, I'm going to be 70 in May, which is it's still a little twisty in my brain, but my brain has a little more time to get used to the idea, or not. And so I don't work quite at the same pace that I worked in my 30s or 40s or even 50s. And yet I'm highly productive. So, and I think in part it's because I really take time for myself. I have my morning practice. I'm blessed that I live in Southern California. Even though we're in the midst of a pandemic, I at least can go outside and walk. I take a virtual yoga class. I have a Pilates bar to help with some of my muscles that just seem to not want to remain. and so that's my self-care. I make sure I drink water, and that's important for everyone, but that has never been a natural part of me. I have to be very intentional about drinking water, and it's critical because we're made up of water. And so I have to structure that to ensure that I actually do that. I tend to eat pretty healthy most of the time. I have my moments. I have my special treat foods that I indulge in. My latest love is I've always loved whipped cream. It's just something I love. Well, I don't eat milk products anymore. But my sister recently told me about coconut whipped cream. So I can have little tablespoons of that and I am a happy girl, or a square of dark chocolate. So even the indulgences can be more often because, they're small. And even all of that has been a journey because I have had issues with my body or weight in my lifetime. And I got rid of diets and really started developing a healthier relationship with my body and listening to it. I'm really good at taking time off. I'm really good at pushing through when I have to, so I think you have to find what works and what's important to you. I used to go get massages. Being in California, we're pretty shut down here. So we've been having to be more creative. But it all starts with you first. Because when you fill up your love tank, then you have something to offer to others. If I didn't take care of myself, I wouldn't be as effective to my clients. I wouldn't be as effective to my sweetheart or my family or my friends. And I'm a big relationship person. Everything's about relationships to me. The relationship I have with myself, with my sweetheart, with my family, my friends, my business, with my finances, all of that. It all in my mind is relationship oriented.
Has there been anything that you've created out of all this COVID mess that you thought, oh, I wouldn't have thought of this or wouldn't had to think of how to do this if it wasn't for having to stay in place?
Um, well, what I can tell you is two things. Last year in 2020 was a very mixed year for me. I was starting to feel like I needed to go within a little bit more. And given our circumstances of a forced time out, you know, for many years, I've been working with clients virtually. So that really hadn't changed, although I wasn't putting as much effort into my business. And there was a slight decline, which happens.
Mm-hmm.
But this time it was like, no. And the gift of that actually was my son had a health crisis last year. And it gave me opportunity to be with him, to support him in his health journey. And I'm happy to say he's doing much better again. But the other thing that came about was for a while now, and while I mean probably years. I don't remember when I had the first thought. And I had a book on Attract Love Now, or what I now called The Miracle of Attracting Love. That was like 90% done. And I went, no, not time for that. This other book needs to come to fruition. In fact, I've just recently turned it over to my publisher. We have a release date we don't have the specific date, but it's going to be early April. And so I wrote the book, Create Your Miraculous Life. It's never too late. And the theme of it's never too late has been with me for a while now. First of all, because of my age, I have so much more I want to be doing and experiencing. And yet I know that there are fewer steps in front of me than there are behind me. And I think because of COVID, Kimberly, there are so many people that have been truly impacted negatively by the circumstances. Many of us, me included, have lost loved ones from COVID. Many people have lost their jobs. Many people are struggling financially or wondering what the heck's going to happen. And we could keep going. Not to mention here in the United States, we've had such political unrest. We had the Me Too movement. There's just a lot of turmoil right now. And I just felt the theme of it's never too late was more important than ever before. Because I wanted a book, I wanted a message that hopefully will inspire people to recognize what's ever in your heart, that desire is your truth. And it's possible for you to be experiencing it. And I don't care what your age, what your circumstances, it's really possible. And my methodology helps people to close that gap from where they are to where they want to be. So the book was really the gift. My business declining some was also a gift to be able to, you know, be with my son and nurture him. He lived with me for several months. In fact, about a month ago, he moved back up to San Francisco, and bittersweet, happy that he was well. I was like, no. Took a little getting used to having him gone again, although I have to say my food bill is significantly less again. My electricity, you know, everything is going to be much more moderate. Mm-hmm. And that's not a complaint. So I would say that's been one of the gifts. And I've always had the belief that in devastation or challenges, there's always opportunity. Mm-hmm. Even when I was in the depth of depression from my accident and losing custody of my son, I was like, what choices had I made that got me into this mess? And what was going to need to happen differently? Who was I going to need to be different? How was I going to make choices differently to dig myself out of that hole? And by the way, in that moment, I remember saying, God, please help me dig out of this hole. And I promise I will pay it forward.
Mhm.
And I got my wish.
Yes, and you do. And thank you for that.
Yeah.
So when you work with people, how do you do that? I want to know how these miracles come alive.
Yeah, I think it starts with, first of all, waking up and acknowledging the desires. The first part when I work with people, I call it magic wand time. To really open up. If you could wave your magic wand, how do you want to be living your life? I gave you the example of, I always wanted to have a home that overlooked the water. Well, I'm not there yet, but I'm pretty close.
Mhm.
And so it's important to wake those desires up, to really look at what I refer to as the vision of your life. But then when I work with people, we also go in deeper into the mission of why do I want a house overseeing the ocean? Yes, it's wonderful, but it will nourish me. And it also is kind of my good job, girl. You've gotten your job done. You're getting your job done for what you were brought to earth to do.
Mhm.
And then we dig for what I call buried gold, buried treasure, because I believe everybody has so much within them that maybe has been pushed down or squashed from life experiences. I like to compare it to, supposedly, are you familiar with Michelangelo's David, the big statue
Yes.
of David in Florence? I've seen David twice. The first time, it took my breath away. I didn't expect him to be that big. and and so supposedly neither of us were there, but supposedly Michelangelo was asked, how did you carve David out of this single slab of marble? And the response from Michelangelo was, well, David was already there. My job was just to remove that which was not David. And I feel that that is what I do. I help to uncover what's interfering, what's holding you back. And I'm able to align your mind with your heart. I also have and the Miraculous Living Method itself is a 3-part system of, I mentioned, the singing.
Mhm.
That's how healing comes through me. I also have transformational healing cards that have an energy with them, combined with either affirmations, or eventually my clients and I write scenarios of the life they'll be living. And it strengthens the brain, because there are a lot of wonderful practitioners out there that do release work. But if you don't train the mind to be in alignment with what your heart's desire is, you risk defaulting back into old patterns. And that's just not okay in my world. And then, we do deal with nuts and bolts and steps, because it's not just hoping, wishing, praying. It's important that people take what I refer to as inspired action. It may not be like, woohoo, inspiration, but you just know you need to take that step. You need to make that call. You need to whatever. And then you take it. And what's beautiful is when you start taking steps, the universe starts giving you more guidance, more direction, because it appears that God in the universe likes it when we're in action. It doesn't mean you have to run a marathon. And then it's important to acknowledge these miraculous moments, because the truth of the matter is everything is really a miracle.
Mhm.
A couple years ago, because my dad died at the age of 56 of a heart attack, I always had concern about my heart. And I hadn't had it tested for a while. And I thought, maybe it's time. And this time, they just did an ultrasound. And maybe it's an echocardiogram. I don't even remember right now. I could see my heart in action. It was the most amazing, miraculous moment. I mean, it was like, oh my gosh, look at that little sucker working so hard for me.
Mhm.
And we take so much for granted. I can't remember in this moment the quote, but it's like either, and it might have been Einstein, either you can look at life as nothing is a miracle, or you'll recognize that everything is a miracle.
Mhm.
And I have to add a little PS to this. I never thought I was going to be in the miracle business. If you had asked me when I grew up what I wanted to be when I grow up, I would not have said, oh, could I be a miracle worker, please? And it really happened. I happen to have been raised Jewish. My father, as I mentioned, passed away at 56. His Hebrew name was Nissen. And when my son was born, I really wanted to give him a Hebrew name. And even though I wasn't really practicing at that point, but I wanted to honor my father. And so Nissen was going to be part of his Hebrew name. My former husband's grandfather had also passed away, and that's typical in Judaism. You typically will name after the deceased. And his name was Charles, and that translates to Chaim in Hebrew, which means life. My son's Hebrew name is Nissen Chaim, which translates to the miracle of life.
That's beautiful.
And it was my first book, it's right behind me. The Miracle That Is Your Life was birthed out of that experience. And in fact, it had me rename my business, the Miraculous Living Institute. And so I came by it, not intentionally, but I really feel, first of all, it honors my dad. It honors the miracle that I hold to this very day of my son. And it honors what's possible to each and every person today.
All right. Well, thank you. So what is important to you? What gives you the most happiness, fulfillment in your life at this point?
Um, well, I really have a lot of gratitude, even in the middle of COVID. I'm grateful. Every morning I wake up and I always find things that I'm grateful for. You can't see it, but I'm in my office in Den area, and I have this yellow cushy chair that I sit in the morning, and the sun typically shines through the window. And the blessing of being alive and having an amazing relationship, my son's health, and our relationship. So living from a place of gratitude. Also, I love working with my clients. I mean, if I had a tail, it would wag. Seeing their lives being enriched and fulfilled and dreams coming true. There's nothing more rewarding. I love speaking. Right now I speak, but it's virtually. I kind of miss the stage, but I'm very accepting of our circumstances. Do I miss getting on an airplane going someplace? Yes. Is it great that sometimes I can be all dressed up and still wear my yoga pants like right now, and it's fine. My clothing budget has probably been deeply effective in a good way. And so that brings me a lot of joy. I'm blessed that I can get outside and get fresh air. And I'm a people person. I value my friendships so very much, and my family, and that brings me fulfillment. I miss hugs. I miss hugging my friends. I miss hugging in person. Again, it's not a horrible thing, but it's a missing. And I'm blessed in that I find a lot of pleasure in the very little things in life. And so it doesn't take a whole lot for me. And I'm very grateful for Zoom. And then we get to all meet like this. My only regret is that I didn't have enough vision or foresight to purchase stock in Zoom.
Yeah. I think we're all thinking that right now. So I'm sure some people would like to work with you. So why don't you at this point go over, where people can find you or how they can contact you, and also you talked a little bit about your book, but talk about your book and the programs you have coming out in the near future.
Sure. Well, first of all, it's very easy to get a hold of me. At least I think so. You can go to my website, wendydarling.com. There's a place that you can schedule a heart-to-heart with me if you want to talk to me about what's going on, see if we're a fit or not. Also, you can email me, wendy@wendydarling.com. And so I mentioned I have my one book, The Miracle That Is Your Life. My next book, Create Your Miraculous Life. It's Never Too Late, will be released, I believe, in early April. I am just ready to launch my next, The Miracle of Attracting Love Now for singles. We're in February, and I've always had a soft spot. If I could, I would take Valentine's gifts to everyone that's single. I did that when I was single. I've always done things like that. I just mailed out a whole bunch of cards the other day. So I have that program coming up. The book launch will be in April. And then this summer, I will be offering my certification program. I train coaches and practitioners in the Miraculous Living Method. I was able to find a way to duplicate that and allow them, as well as their clients, to get easier and faster results.
All right. Well, thank you. And thank you so much for being on the podcast today.
Oh, my pleasure. My pleasure. Thank goodness that we're able to connect this way. And I'm always happy to share, to empower people to be living, in my world, miraculous lives.
So I have one last question before we complete. What is your best advice on living a miraculous, usually I say incredible, but miraculous, incredible life?
To just be honest with yourself, to do your best to live from your heart, honor your heart. And that might also be to honor the heart aches. People sometimes don't want to lean into that. I'm very blessed. I mean, I've worked with people, for example, that have been abused, and because of the Miraculous Living Method, we just washed that away. They don't have to relive it. So you want to live your truth, to be kind to yourself, to be loving towards yourself, and pay attention. What miracles have you experienced? Sometimes a miracle is I get all my water, drinking all my water every day, because I don't naturally get thirsty all that often. So I structure that, or that I got my exercise in. That's a miracle. To not indulge maybe in certain food, or to make that call. Pay attention. A miracle is anything you see that's happening. Of course, it's also a miracle when somebody like you, Kimberly, just out of the blue, we connected, and you invited me to your podcast. That's miraculous in my world. The more you start recognizing miracles, you'll start recognizing even more. And you'll get to see that you're receiving even more miracles. It's just like anything else. So pay attention and listen to the quiet pulls or whispers in your heart. They're guiding you. That's your inner guidance system. It's guiding you to be living your best, incredible, miraculous life.
All right. We'll end with that. Thank you so much, Wendy.
Oh, you're welcome.
We'll talk to you again soon.